Hello everyone, it's the storyteller here. I've prepared something slow, eerie, and sleep-friendly for you tonight. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and let me know in the comments. Are you drifting off already, or still wide awake? He's right behind you. We'd go out around one, climbing through bedroom windows. We'd try to land softly on bushes and backyard lawns. Some of us went barefoot. Some hid a spare pair of sneakers under porches or tucked under tarps used for covering patio furniture. Some of us just liked being barefoot. It made us feel as though we'd have the strength that comes from mimicking the uncivilized. Some of us would play the whole game with no shoes. No shoes, no shirts. One of us liked to play the game in only his boxer shorts. He would dare anyone to mention his near nakedness. I'm not gay for running around the woods in my underwear. You're all gay for looking at me in my underwear. This is teenage logic. Everything is a chess match where both players have only recently discovered how to play Monopoly. Board games were daytime affairs. We would play them by the above-ground pools and in basements while our parents were at work. We were old enough to be home alone, provided we memorized the phone numbers of all the retired neighbors who could, theoretically, get to us quickly in the event of an emergency. Practically speaking, 70-year-old Mrs. Hasher would not have been able to help any of us had a deranged murderer targeted us the way they did in the cable movies we weren't supposed to watch. But our parents told themselves stories the same way we did. Stories about safety. Stories about good neighborhoods. Stories about how much a locked door could accomplish. Years ago, a girl had been abducted from her home on our street. But the rumor was she opened the door when a stranger knocked. Our parents didn't say it, but they secretly believed that meant she deserved to be kidnapped. I mean, if your kid is dumb enough to open up the door for just anybody, they told themselves that we, their children, were smarter than that. Smarter than that girl. We were not smarter. We were, in fact, a lot dumber than her. Of course, we didn't know that. We thought we were geniuses. Genius, warrior, punks with wisdom and ferocity, and all before our 15th birthday. We believed people were jealous of us, but we didn't know who these people might be. We believed that everyone at school had gone to at least second base, and we were ashamed to have never seen a naked girl in real life. We laughed at the word condom, but we believed, given the opportunity, that we would be intrinsically fantastic at lovemaking. At school, we had posters in our locker of Sarah Michelle Gellar and Jennifer Love Hewitt, and those of us who had gone to first base had that one poster of Cameron Diaz that would have gotten us suspended if a teacher saw it. We'd gather at each other's lockers and discuss the arrangements for the game that night. We'd agree on a spot in the woods. Some of us liked meeting at the tree that had been split in half by lighting. Some liked the rock formation that resembled an old man kneeling with his head down. Once the location was agreed upon, we'd argue about the time. Some of us wanted to meet at midnight on the dot. We didn't realize that we were in love with the poetry of it, because we swore we hated poetry based on what our teachers had us read. Some wanted to do it later, much later. Some wanted to meet at 3 or 4 so that the game would last until dawn. Tomorrow's Saturday. We don't have school. What's the problem? The problem was that some of our parents got up around dawn. Some of our mothers would have a heart attack if they woke up and found our beds empty. Some of us didn't want to worry our parents. Some of our fathers used a belt if we misbehaved. Some of us cared about our parents too much to let them know what their children were up to at night. Some of us feared our parents more than we feared anything in the woods. Some of us feared nothing. Some of us loved the idea of being gone when our parents woke up, making them think that we'd escaped, that we were on a runway train somewhere, moving further and further away from them. Some of us liked the feeling of the belt on our skin because it solidified the hate we felt for the people we were meant to love the hardest. We'd usually meet a little after 1. If it was warm out, we'd meet by the lake where the summer camp used to be until it went out of business. The cabins were still there, and the picnic tables, and the signs that said mess hall and nurse's office. The paint on the signs was fading. Vines were growing over the cabin windows. We didn't explore the camp at night. Even the bravest among us weren't that fearless. We'd seen at least one horror movie that took place at a camp, and we didn't want to be chased by a man with a mask. We only wanted to play a game. In our game, if you followed the rules, you didn't get hurt. Nothing bad happened. If you broke the rules, the game was over for you. But that was it. No injuries, no harm. It was all about stamina, sustaining yourself throughout the night. There wasn't really any loss. There wasn't even a real way to win. Bragging rights were all we had to play for, and yet they seemed more valuable than the $100 bills our fathers would leave out on the kitchen counter as though tempting us to steal. Some of us did steal. Some of us felt the belt. Some of us liked it. But we'd never say who. We started by the lake, and we faced off against each other, eye to eye with another boy standing a foot away from you. That was how it began. We would face each other, take a deep breath, and say, "He's right behind you." One of us would say it. The other would listen. Then the other person would say it. "He's right behind you." And we would escalate the intensity. The rule was that you could not say anything other than those 4 words, but you could say them however you liked. We could shout them at each other. We could whisper them. Those of us who were more strategic knew that volume wasn't enough. It was about having an action, an objective. It was important to keep a verb in mind: beg, cajole, beseech, caution, plead, convince, convince, convince. He's right behind you. It didn't matter that we played this game several times a week for 2 years. It didn't matter that we knew that nobody was behind us. Inevitably, someone would get spooked. One of us would run home. That first hint of terror was contagious. Soon, more of us would be retreating back to our homes. It was rare that more than 3 or 4 of us would be left by the end of the night. If your partner ran away, you would find someone else who had also lost their partner. And you would face off against them, speaking the 4 words. If you were the only one without a partner, you stood silently and waited for someone to leave. Like most boys our age, we had no respect for anything we were meant to respect, and the utmost respect for imaginary things and made-up scenarios, school and church and authority and death were all laughable to us. But this game that we had created out of nothing, this was something to be taken seriously. None of us could remember who started it. Maybe an older boy who had since graduated from childishly sneaking out of his room at night. Maybe we all put it together, like a story composed of hormones and dirty sweat. Maybe it didn't matter. All that mattered was keeping it alive for as long as we could. We never spoke of the game outside of planning it between classes at our lockers. We never talked about who was good at it or bad at it. We never talked about who stayed the longest or who left first. We just played. We played, and we never planned to stop playing. One night, one of us was staring at his partner when he saw the other boy's eyes look slightly to the left. This was against the rules. You only looked at your partner. You used the 4 words to scare them, if you could. You didn't involve physicality, not even a slight shift in focus. The other boy began to shake his head. This was wrong. This was against the rules. None of us knew what to do if someone broke the rules, because nobody had ever broken the rules. There were no referees, and even if there were, it wouldn't have mattered now, because there were only 2 boys left on that night. The other boy appeared to almost choke. He coughed out the words, "He's right behind you." The other boy looked as though he was going to raise an arm, raise a hand, point to something. Instead, he ran off. The other boy wasn't supposed to run off. You were supposed to wait until the other person said the 4 words. You were supposed to give them a chance to scare you back. One of us stood there that night, all alone, and felt an immense pride extending down his shoulders and off into the ground below his feet. He was the only one left. A laugh barked past his lips. It was a nervous laugh. but he didn't know where the nerves were coming from, and he wondered if he could get home before his father banged on his door to wake him up for school. If not, it would be the belt. But did that mean anything? He was the last one of us still standing there in the woods. "He's right behind me." He didn't know why he said it. It wasn't true. There was nobody behind him. Every sound was natural. Every presence an imagined one. Every instinct to flee was his paranoia trying to torment him now that all his fellow competitors were gone. He would stand in the woods for as long as he liked. He would enjoy this moment. Despite winning nothing, he would tell himself he was a winner. He was no longer one of us. He was someone else. "He's right behind me," but the game was over. There was nobody left to scare. Dance of the damned. The dimly lit bar exuded an aura of faded elegance. The soft glow of neon lights casting a surreal ambiance over the audience, who sat in hushed anticipation. As the spotlight flickered to life, illuminating the makeshift stage at one end of the room, the murmurs of conversation died down, replaced by an air of eager expectation. As the curtains slowly parted, revealing the expanse of the stage, a solitary figure stood poised at its center, the ballerina, with a grace that seemed to transcend the earthly realm. The ballerina came to life as the first notes of the music filled the air. Her movements were a symphony of fluidity and precision, each step a testament to years of tireless dedication and unwavering discipline. Like a delicate flower swaying in the breeze, she floated across the stage, her every motion a masterpiece. Her arms moved languidly, weaving a tale of love and longing with each sweep and arc. She beckoned the audience into her world with each movement, inviting them to share her emotions. Poised and elegant, the ballerina commanded the stage with a commanding and serene presence. Her posture was flawless, her form a study in perfect alignment. She seemed to defy gravity, soaring effortlessly through the air with divine grace. Her footwork was a marvel to behold, each step executed with exquisite precision and grace. From the delicate steps to the lightning-fast turns, her movements were a testament to the strength and agility of the human body. The audience watched in awe as she leaped and twirled across the stage, her every movement a testament to the power of the human spirit. But beyond the technical prowess, the ballerina's ability to convey emotion captivated the audience. With each extension of her leg and each arch of her back, she imbued her performance with a depth of feeling that resonated with all who watched. From the depths of despair to the heights of ecstasy, her dance spoke to the universal human experience, transcending language and culture. The ballerina executed a series of mesmerizing turns that left the audience breathless. Spinning gracefully across the stage, she seemed to defy the laws of physics, her movements a blur of motion and light. But as the music swelled to its crescendo, and the time for her final bow arrived, a sudden sense of unease settled over the bar. With a flourish, the ballerina prepared to take her bow, her movements graceful and poised. But then disaster struck in a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity. Inexplicably, she stumbled, her perfect balance faltering as she fell to the ground in a heap. Gasps of shock echoed through the bar as the audience watched in horror. But it was what happened next that genuinely chilled them to the bone. As the ballerina lay on the stage, everything around her seemed to shift and blur, as if reality was unraveling. The once vibrant colors of the stage faded to a dull, lifeless gray, and a sickening sense of dread hung heavy in the air. And then, from her wrists and ankles, blood began to flow, staining the stage crimson red. It pooled around her, a macabre tableau of horror and despair. With a sudden jerk, the ballerina rose to her feet, her movements jerky and unnatural. It was as if she were a marionette manipulated by unseen hands, her body moving in grotesque contortions that defied all logic and reason. The audience watched in stunned silence as the once graceful ballerina twisted and convulsed, her limbs bending at impossible angles. And then, with a horrifying realization, they understood what was happening. She was no longer in control of her own body. With each agonizing movement, it became clear that she was under control by some evil force, a dark presence that lurked unseen in the shadows. As she danced her final, nightmarish dance, the audience could only watch her twisted performance in helpless horror. They knew they were witnessing something more sinister than a dance. They saw the manifestation of pure, unadulterated evil, a force beyond comprehension that had seized control of the ballerina's soul. As the ballerina rose from the stage floor, her once graceful movements became grotesque spasms of pain and fear. With each jerky motion, her bones fractured and splintered, and the sickening sound of snapping echoed through the bar like a macabre symphony. Her limbs twisted at unnatural angles, each movement a torment of agony that etched lines of suffering onto her pale, sweat-drenched face. Her eyes, wide with terror, pleaded for release. Still, her mouth was closed by wire that had inexplicably wrapped around her lips, sealing them shut with cruel finality. Blood dripped from the small holes punctured by the wire, staining her pristine costume with crimson droplets. With each convulsion, her skin ripped, revealing raw, red flesh beneath. The air was thick with the metallic scent of blood and the sickening stench of decay, a suffocating fog that enveloped the stage in a shroud of horror. The audience watched in horrified fascination as the ballerina's body contorted and twisted, her movements growing more frantic and erratic with each passing moment. It was as if she looked torn apart from the inside out, her very essence consumed by the dark forces that held her in their grasp. The once pristine costume began to tear and shred with each jerky movement. Fabric rents apart like paper, exposing swaths of pale, sweat-sickened skin beneath. The delicate tutu, once a symbol of elegance and grace, now hung in tatters around her hips, the shredded remnants barely clinging to her broken form. With each agonizing twist and contortion, more of her flesh lay bare to the horrified audience. The delicate lace and satin that had once adorned her body now lay in tatters on the stage floor, a grotesque parody of the beauty that had once been. And as the last shreds of fabric fell away, the ballerina stood naked and exposed before the stunned onlookers. Her body, once a vision of perfection, was now marred by bruises and welts, the result of the unspeakable torture she had endured. The audience, pinned to their chairs by a mixture of terror and morbid fascination, could only watch in horror as the ballerina's broken form was laid bare before them. There was nowhere to look and hide from the gruesome spectacle unfolding on stage. Everyone was dressed like ballerinas and knew they would dance on that stage. They wanted to run, but couldn't move, as an invisible force controlled them. As the ballerina's tortured dance finally came to an end, the audience was left to grapple with the horrifying images that had seared into their minds, a grim testament to the depths of depravity that lurked within the shadows of the human soul. And then, with a final, gut-wrenching spasm, she collapsed to the ground in a heap of broken bones and shredded flesh. Her once beautiful form stood reduced to nothing more than a grotesque pile of meat and bone, a haunting reminder of the horrors that lurked beneath the surface of reality. A palpable tension hung in the air, suffocating the bar in an oppressive silence. The audience, gripped by horror and fascination, could not tear their eyes away from the grotesque spectacle unfolding before them. Everything disappeared into darkness, leaving only screams. The darkness seemed to last forever. Suddenly, as the final notes of the haunting melody faded into the darkness, the stage erupted into blinding light, illuminating a scene of unspeakable horror. Standing at the center of the stage was another woman, clad in a tattered ballerina costume. Yet any semblance of grace or beauty was shattered by the sight of the twisted iron-spiked wire that bound her limbs, cutting into her flesh with every movement. Where her eyes should have been, there were only bloody craters oozing with the sickening evidence of unspeakable violence. Her mouth, too, was sealed shut with glue, denying her even the semblance of a voice to cry out in pain. With a start, the woman began to dance, her movements jerky and erratic as she struggled against the cruel restraints that bound her. Blood spilled onto the stage with each tortured step, staining the pristine floorboards with a sickening crimson hue. As the grotesque spectacle unfolded on stage, 10 figures sat in silence, their faces hidden behind intricate designs of porcelain and feathers, giving them an air of anonymity and intrigue. Dressed uniformly in black suits and dresses, the men and women held glasses filled with a dark crimson liquid, which remained a mystery to those around them. With each sickening snap of bone, they raised their glasses in a silent toast, the red liquid sloshing gently within. Their reactions were chillingly composed, their expressions hidden behind the masks as they watched the ballerina's torment unfold with a sense of detached amusement. To them, the grotesque display was not a source of horror, but a form of entertainment, a dreadful performance to be savored and enjoyed. And so, as the final horrific act played out on stage, and the ballerina's lifeless form lay crumpled on the ground, the figures rose from their seats in unison, their masks giving nothing away as they started to laugh. Witches get stitches. The tea house was full of women sipping from cups and pouring from various teapots. Mona, Heptonstall, winced. She didn't have any money to buy a drink. She didn't have any money at all. She was only a young schoolgirl. But the sight of all these women put her at ease a little. And God knew that she needed somewhere to feel safe right now. Mona ducked into the shop, past the few tables outside, occupied by little old ladies sitting in the shade. The aroma inside the tea house was exotic and familiar, exciting and cozy. Steam wafted from the rims of mugs, none of which were matching. It was as though the owner had put serious effort into ensuring all crockery sets were different. Women sat clustered into groups and pairs, chatting away. Some sat solo, unconcerned with their lack of company. They smiled, contented and closed-eyed, into the sunshine while sipping their brews. On the walls, various posters and flags hung. There was something about flowers and plants here. There was something about animals being friends there. The symbol for females, the circle above a cross, was here. Rainbow flags and a flag with light blue, pink, and white stripes hung there. Plant pots housed a forest's worth of greenery, growing in every direction. The flowers crawled up stakes and dangled from shelves, and dog-eared books about cooking, herbology, feminism, and equal rights were everywhere. Mona's thudding heart slowed, and her stitched-up eyebrow settled into a steady pulse. This tea house was a nice place, a good place, one that she imagined that grubby Gilbert wouldn't think to check. She glanced over her shoulder out the window into the sun-drowned street outside. Grubby Gilbert Boyd came plodding along as if on cue, a frown etched upon his bovine countenance. His pot belly bounced as he slowed to a trot, his head jerking around like a pigeon's. A bead of sweat trickled down his forehead. Beneath his food-stained shirt, his chest rose and fell with heavy breaths. His eyes passed over the tea house, and he didn't seem to register it was there. Then he moved on. A few seconds later, Gilbert had passed the shop and disappeared down the street. She couldn't help but grin at the boy's stupidity. If only it were always that easy to escape his chubby fingers. Everyone, her teachers and parents, said he only picked on her because he liked her. He pushed her and pulled her and tripped her up because he fancied her. To Mona, this had made no sense whatsoever. First, why would you do those things to somebody you liked? Second of all, what kind of excuse was that? She had to endure this unhappiness because of the reason behind his actions. Besides, even if he had asked her out, she didn't think he was all that interesting or good-looking. She wasn't interested. When she'd split open her eyebrow after he'd stuck his leg out last week, she hoped that'd be the end. Alas, grubby Gilbert didn't give up. She stepped to the side to watch him trot down the street. She walked right into a table whilst she gazed in the opposite direction. Mona squeaked, timid like a mouse, as time slowed around her. The table toppled over. The mugs crashed to the floor and disintegrated, spilling hot tea over the rug. The flowery doily drifted to the ground, where the liquid stained it brown. The two women flinched backwards from the carnage and squealed. They escaped the flying china unscathed, but lost their beverages to gravity. Mona gasped, wide-eyed, hands raised in self-defense. Oh no. Oh no. 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 This accident was not good. Not good at all. She had no money, nothing with which she could make amends. She tried to think, speak, and act. But fear rooted her to the spot. A woman with a tea towel draped over her shoulder came marching up to the scene. The woman was tall and had an out-there fashion sense. Her long hair, which she'd tied up into a bun. She'd dyed electric blue. Her eyebrows and her eyes were coffee brown. Tattoos crawled up both arms, under the sleeves of her dress, and up the sides of her neck. The dress was black, with a flowery design, both gothic and summery. A hoop dangled from her nose, and more piercings than Mona had ever seen dotted her ears. She took the tea towel and dropped it into the puddle, which disappeared. Before Mona could blink, the table was upright, its doily pristine, and the mug shards were gone. The blue-haired woman called to a younger girl who was busy behind the counter. "Sabrina, another ginger tea and a peppermint tea for this table, please. On the house, of course." Mona shriveled before the sight of her. Adults always seemed big. Despite being no taller than the other grown-ups, this woman seemed like a giantess. Some unknown qualities made her presence more clear. She squeezed her hands together, averted her eyes, and awaited the tongue lashing. "I'm Alice Wallaker, and this is my tea house. Do you mind answering a few questions? Oh God, oh God, oh God. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to. I'm such an idiot. I'm such a stupid idiot." Alice silenced her with a wave of her hand. She smiled. "Never mind about that, Mona. Don't cry over spilt milk. Unless if it's for a black cat. What's your name, sweetie?" Something cold and jagged inside Mona began to melt. Calmness washed over her. She looked up into those warm brown eyes and didn't see the hostility she expected to find. "I'm Mona Heptonstall." Alice's eyes rolled over her every feature, settling on the stitches in her eyebrow. An odd look sparkled behind her kind eyes. "And what's his name, Mona?" Mona took a sharp inhale of breath. How did she know? Mona debated lying and telling Alice that there was no him. She was fine, and nothing was wrong. She soon abandoned this, then entertained the thought of giving the woman a fake name. But then that flittered away like a bat on the night's breeze. In the end, Mona told the truth. "Gilbert Boyd." Alice wrinkled her nose as though she knew the boy already. She inhaled through her nose, then out through her mouth. She bent down, picked up her tea towel, now bone dry, and slung it over her shoulder again. "Come with me." Uh-oh. Here it came. This point was the moment that Ms. Wallaker would call the police, and they'd take her away. The cops would call her school, and the school would tell her parents. She'd be in so much trouble because she wanted to escape Grubby Gilbert. Alice ushered her through the packed tea house with a gentle hand on one shoulder. It seemed that every pair of eyes watched them go with hungry curiosity. And something else was in those gazes, too. Alice took her into the back of the tea house, past the telephone. Mona opened her mouth to ask, but then closed it again. Alice opened a door near the back of the building and led her down a beautiful wooden staircase. Despite their descent, the sunlight seemed to grow stronger. It shined through windows that should have been underground. She pushed open a grand pair of double doors and brought her into. Mona frowned. A library? Alice turned to face her. She stretched her hands out either side of her, as if reaching for the walls. Behind her, shelves of books stretched on for an impossible distance. Here and there bustled all kinds of women. They scanned shelves and pored over forgotten tomes. Some looked happy and healthy. Others looked battered and bruised. Expressions ranged from interest to anger. A middle-aged woman with a black eye gritted her teeth and flicked through the pages of a thick book. Nearby, a granny chuckled into her stack of open books, mumbling about teaching the bugger. Yes, said Alice. A library. A special library. A secret library containing hidden knowledge for people like us. Like us? Alice smiled. Women. Now, Mona understood what had been in the eyes of all those women as Alice took her through the tea house. Sympathy. Sympathy and understanding. They'd all been in similar positions before, too. They knew how it felt. And when they saw a little girl experiencing the same, they couldn't help but send their hearts to her. Her mouth dried up. Only for women, Alice nodded, then turned and beckoned her. Come, we can find something to help your predicament. We have a little something for everyone, from ailments to revenge. But something gentler might be a good starting point for you. Mona paused. You're going to help me? But I wrecked your tea house. Alice surprised her by laughing. Oh, Mona, you didn't wreck anything. Besides, you were seeking shelter, weren't you? Well, you found it. Mona found herself laughing too. A few minutes prior, she'd never felt less like laughing. But being around this woman had eased her wounded heart. It was as though she were magic. She stopped dead in her tracks. Are you? Alice turned, eyebrows raised, mischief written in the color of her cheeks. She said nothing and waited for Mona to ask. She blurted it out. Are you a witch? Alice's eyes danced. Why, of course. All the best women are. She'd expected to feel terror, coldness, claustrophobia. This woman was into the dark arts. Alice practiced magic and witchcraft. She ought to be frightening. And yet, she wasn't. At least, not to Mona. But she thought Alice could be scary to the right or wrong kind of person. The sort of person like Gilbert Boyd. And the types of people Gilbert Boyd would grow up into if left unchecked. But to Mona, she felt as if an umbrella of love had opened over her head. Not only was the rain no longer falling on her, but the sun shone through the material. Mona followed the witch deeper into the library. "What kind of help, Ms. Wallaker?" Alice hummed and scanned the shelves, pointing at them as if eyeing a police lineup. At last, she said, "Aha!" and produced a book from a shelf. It wasn't quite Baby's First Seance or Witchcraft for Dummies, but close enough. A beginner's book, an entry point into the dark arts. Only, were these arts dark? Or had men labeled them as such? Mona took the book, feeling the weight of power crackling through her fingertips. She couldn't help but utter a contented sigh. Alice opened the book and slid a finger down the index page, tapping on certain words. "Like this, Mona. There's some powerful stuff in here. Stuff that I wouldn't share with a boy, no matter how old he was. But you can handle that responsibility, can't you, Mona?" Mona decided that she could. The Manuscript of Kashi. There are places where the veil between the known and the unfathomable is perilously thin. And it is in such realms that truths are best left forgotten. Ancient Kashi, now Varanasi, conceals more than history in its name. With dusk settling, the city wraps itself in a twilight shroud. Smoke threads twist through the air, blending with murmured prayers, thickening the atmosphere with an almost tangible sense of mystery. The Ganges River reflects the glimmering lights of ceremonial fires along the Ghats, where the sacred and the profane dance in the curling mists. The pyres, fed by ancient woods, consume the bodies with a reverence that belies the violence of flames. The air is thick with sandalwood and charred offerings, masking the finality of death under sacred rites. In the shallows of the Ganges, silhouetted figures wade with deliberate steps. These men, draped in the sparse cloth of the destitute, are seekers of the dead's forgotten wealth. Their hands, darkened by river silt and ash, sift through the submerged sands, feeling for the cold bite of metal. Gold rings, necklaces, and the occasional coin dropped from the deceased's pockets, each piece plucked from the holy river's grip, is a macabre token of survival, destined to be cleansed, melted down, and sold to adorn the living. Stepping off a narrow boat onto the stone steps, James Montgomery, a British archaeologist, felt as though he had entered a painting, a scene preserved across the ages. Even with his academic accolades, James clung to his skepticism like a knight to his armor, guarding against the intangible. He believed only in what could be touched, measured, seen. Yet Varanasi seemed determined to erode his certainties. His constant companion, a weathered copy of the Tibetan Book of the Dead, betrayed a fascination with the afterlife, a scholarly interest, he insisted, nothing more. His trained eyes sketched and noted details as he walked through the bustling streets. It was early spring of 1932, and the British Raj held sway over India. Political tensions were palpable, with the struggle for independence intensifying across many regions like a storm gathering on the horizon. He had spent years poring over texts and artifacts in the dusty confines of the British Museum. This opportunity for fieldwork was a rare departure from his usual scholarly pursuits, and he was determined to make the most of it. Fluent in Sanskrit and well-versed in Hindu and Sikh philosophy and religion, he was chosen for an excavation project at the revered Kashi Vishwanath Temple, one of the 12 Jyotirlingas, the holiest Shiva temples. The task was to study and document newly unearthed relics that had recently been discovered beneath the temple grounds. James had heard rumors of an ancient sanctuary that once stood where the Kashi Vishwanath Temple now dominated. Scholars had long debated its origins, speculating that it might have been dedicated to Vishnu and built during a time when the city was a flourishing center of Vaishnavite worship. This prospect excited him not only for its historical significance, but also for the professional acclaim that such a discovery would bring. James adjusted his satchel and stepped toward the temple, his eyes scanning the intricate carvings with a critical eye. Agoras, an ascetic sect known for extreme Hinduism, roamed the temple grounds. Ignoring the incense and chants, he focused on the worn stone steps, tracing the passage of countless feet over centuries. His fingers brushed against the ancient stone, lingering longer than necessary. His distrust, a fortress against the unknown, was built brick by brick from his strictly rational upbringing. His father, a staunch scientist, had always dismissed anything that couldn't be quantified or measured. Yet, the allure of the mystical and the unexplainable had always gnawed at the edges of James's curiosity. Weeks passed as James meticulously cataloged statues, pottery fragments, and other relics brought up by the excavation team. He spent his days under the relentless sun and his evenings in quiet reflection, poring over his notes and comparing them with historical texts. The heat, the dust, and the ceaseless hum of the city created a backdrop of sensory overload, grounding him in the present even as he delved into the past. The distant sounds of political rallies and protests occasionally broke the monotony, reminding him of the larger currents of change sweeping the nation. One afternoon, Pandit Sharma, the temple's priest and scholar, approached James with a bundle wrapped in cloth. Earlier, workers had found it deep within the temple sanctum, and now, silhouetted against the glaring sun, He carried it with a solemn grace. "What have you there, Pandit Sharma?" James asked, dusting his hands off as he stood. The Pandit paused. "This manuscript was among the items uncovered today, Sahib. The workers thought it prudent to bring it directly to me." James raised an eyebrow. "May I?" he asked, reaching out. Pandit Sharma hesitated for a moment before handing it over. "Of course, Mr. Montgomery." It was a weathered leather manuscript. The cover was adorned with unusual mandalas and arcane symbols. Intrigued, James carefully opened the manuscript. His eyes widened slightly. These symbols, they could date back to the time of the Gupta Empire, or even earlier. Is that possible? "Very likely, Sahib," the Pandit replied, his voice measured. "That part of the temple has not been disturbed in centuries." James traced a finger over the inscriptions. These inscriptions, they're unlike anything we've found so far. Quite remarkable how much light this could shed on our understanding of the past. Pandit Sharma nodded thoughtfully. "Yes, it sheds light on forgotten chapters, but even a small light can cast long shadows." James paused, considering the Pandit's words, then smiled slightly. "I am not merely here to unearth the past, Pandit Sharma. I aim to awaken it." Pandit Sharma met his gaze, a hint of understanding in his eyes. "Be mindful, Sahib. Awakened pasts can have lives of their own." James's smile grew. "Precisely, Pandit." He then glanced up, a touch of condescension in his voice. "You're done here. Thanks." With a slight nod, Pandit Sharma turned and walked away, leaving James alone with the manuscript. As James deciphered the text, his breath caught. The manuscript chronicled his life with chilling precision, like a mirror reflecting his deepest secrets. Determined to uncover the manuscript's origins, James carefully closed the ancient pages and clutched it to his chest. He approached one of the workers from the excavation team, asking about the manuscript's origins. They confirmed it had been unearthed from a chamber beneath the temple, near an older sanctuary, possibly dedicated to Vishnu, the preserver of time and destiny. James couldn't believe his luck. This find suggested a time when Vaishnavism thrived in Varanasi, possibly before Shaivism took prominence. Archaeologists had searched for this temple for decades, and here it was, right under his feet. His professional hubris soared. He would be the one to unveil its mysteries. The excavation sparked heated debates among local authorities and religious figures. Many saw it as exploitative and desecrating sacred sites. Workers labored under brutal conditions, some collapsing from exhaustion, a few already dead. Precious relics were bound for Britain, trophies of conquest rather than cultural treasures. James saw how the British Raj thrived on deepening religious divides to maintain control. That night, he took the manuscript with him, its weight heavy in his bag. Stepping out of the temple, A sensation of being watched washed over him. He glanced around, but saw only the sleepy sun and the twinkle of distant torches. As James moved towards the exit, a nearly naked figure, covered in ashes, stepped into his path. The Agori's unblinking eyes bored into his, like twin voids absorbing all light. Without a word, he briefly extended his hand, touching James's chest before drawing back. "The past is not a place you can escape," he murmured, his voice a low rasp. He then stepped aside, allowing James to continue. Other Agoris stood like statues in the shade, their eyes fixed on him. He could feel their silent stares following him as he made his way home, under the weak light of a lone bulb. James hunched over the ancient manuscript spread across the makeshift desk in his rented room near the Ghats. Night had fallen over Varanasi, a cloak of silence occasionally pierced by the distant clamor of street vendors closing shop. His eyes traced the faded Sanskrit inscribed on parchment. The air around him felt unnaturally still, as if the darkness outside was staring at him. As he read further, the words exposed his deepest fears of inadequacy and the recent failure of his marriage. It described the sudden illness and death of his childhood friend, an event that had haunted him for years. It recounted the tragic accident that claimed his sister, down to the exact date and circumstances. The text also revealed his deepest aspirations: to return to Britain as a celebrated scholar, juxtaposed with a chilling prediction that he would never leave India. The manuscript spoke of a future where his work would remain unfinished, his dreams unfulfilled. It knew his private regrets, the letters he wrote but never sent, and his secret fears of dying alone in a foreign land. One evening, a passage caught his eye, a prophecy marking a specific date, ominously close. It predicted a fire that would engulf the Manikarnika Ghat, where the bodies of the dead are cremated in ceaseless pyres. It detailed an ominous ritual involving a sacrifice, ashes, and flames. The description was hauntingly visceral. A growing sense of paranoia marked the days that followed. James noticed figures draped in white ashes, with stark red markings across their foreheads, appearing frequently in his windows and following him around town. They spoke no words, but watched him with an intensity that left his skin crawling. One morning, he found a small clay statue of Shiva outside his door, its eyes painted a vivid red that seemed to follow him into his dreams. The Agoris seemed less like mere devotees and more like heralds of impending doom. They left offerings that were both a blessing and a warning. Fragrant bundles of herbs used in ancient death rituals, cryptic notes penned in an almost forgotten script, hinting at the inevitable turn of the cosmic wheel. As the festival of Mahashivaratri, the great night of Shiva, approached, bringing crowds of pilgrims to the city, James decided it was time to leave India immediately. He hastily packed his belongings and made plans to buy a ticket for the next ship back to Britain. He rushed back to the temple to gather his materials and return the manuscript, hoping to distance himself from the dark predictions. He walked through crowds of devotees lost in their reverent prayers. Behind him, the procession of silent agoris maintained their vigil. Beyond mere observers, they seemed to usher him toward a destiny he had yet to comprehend. Pushing open the chamber's heavy stone door, the manuscript in his bag felt like a living heart beating in sync with his own. A heart that felt, with dreadful certainty, the true nature of the cycle it was bound to. He sensed the followers just beyond the doorway, their silent presence pressing in on him. The musty smell of the ancient parchment mingled with the faint scent of incense. He gently put down the manuscript, but the intricate symbols and diagrams evoked an overwhelming familiarity. The memory of his mentor, Dr. Robert Astor, came unbidden. Astor's voice, rich with reverence, speaking of the Akashic records, that boundless archive of all that ever was and will be. Dr. Astor had described it as an energetic log of all existence, recorded in a non-physical plane known as the ether. James had always dismissed these notions as esoteric ramblings. But now, in the manuscript's presence, he felt a dawning realization that perhaps his mentor had been right all along. James had always viewed the teachings of the Upanishads as academic, yet the manuscript's unsettling synchronicities brought them to life, defying his scholarly detachment. He had searched for logical explanations, but each attempt only deepened his unease. The weight of inevitability grew, pressing down on him like an unseen force. It was as if the manuscript tapped into something profound and ancient, recording the fate of humanity with chilling precision. It felt as if the manuscript was a conduit to the Akashic records themselves, linking him to an endless archive of existence. Brahman, the ultimate reality, no longer seemed a distant metaphysical idea, but a palpable truth closing in on him. He felt an inexplicable compulsion to venture deeper into the sanctum. The air grew denser, charged with an energy that made the hairs on his neck stand. Intricate mandalas adorned the walls, their interlocking patterns subtly swirling, almost alive, drawing him further in. The sense of an unseen force grew more intense, a nearly tangible presence pressing in from all sides. Then, at the heart of the sanctum, James encountered the Timeless One. The entity had no definitive form, appearing as a floating mandala, a geometric figure of shifting forms and glowing light that seemed to be everywhere all at once. An irresistible pull gripped him, his feet moving of their own accord, drawing him into the heart of the mandala. Stepping into it, James found himself in the vast library of the Akashic records, where every event, thought, and possibility was catalogued in endless corridors of knowledge. Shelves stretched beyond sight, each filled with tomes of every life that had ever been and ever would be. He walked through the library, his fingers brushing against ancient scrolls. Each revealed a different path he could have taken, yet all led back to the mandala's center. Every choice, every action had led him here. James encountered visions of his life as he drifted through the Akashic records. Moments of joy and sorrow, triumph and failure. He saw himself as a child, staring wide-eyed at the night sky, dreaming of its mysteries. He saw his younger self, full of ambition and determination, seeking to unravel the secrets of the past. And he saw his present self, standing at the threshold of cosmic enlightenment, poised to transcend the limits of human understanding. The realization struck him with profound clarity. The illusion of Maya unraveled before his eyes. James's lingering self, a fragile residue of his identity, resisted the truth. He saw himself standing at the edge of the void, the vast expanse of the Akashic records stretching before him. With a final, desperate act of surrender, he let go, allowing himself to fall into the mandala's center. The geometric patterns converged into a blinding point of light. And in that light, the true nature of the universe was revealed to James. The boundaries of his being faded away, replaced by the infinite expanse of the cosmic order. Enlightenment and terror walked hand in hand through his psyche as he became one with the eternal truths that had tormented him. Stepping out of the shining temple, naked and transformed, Agoras waited outside, eyes filled with reverence. Their chants, a deep hum of Om Namah Shivaya, rose and fell like the tide. They approached, hands gentle but firm, painting his body with ashes in a sacred and surreal ritual. The manuscript's revelations had stripped him of his former self, exposing him to the timeless one. Shadows blinked under the torchlight, twisting into hideous forms. The Agoris' chants swelled, their voices merging into an ominous crescendo. The night pulsed with otherworldly energy. The streets, the river, the city itself seemed to writhe with their own life. The Agoris approached, their hands moving with ritualistic precision, smearing his skin with ashes. The chants grew louder, each note a harbinger of the horrors hidden within that ancient manuscript. the smell of burnt offerings clinging to the air, mingling with the earthy scent of the river. With eyes dark and impenetrable, the Agories lifted him onto a makeshift bier. Their chants rose as they carried him through the narrow streets, the fire casting long shadows on ancient walls. The city watched in silence, as if holding its breath. The procession reached the ghats, where pyres crackled with an insatiable hunger. They laid him on the pyre, the wood rough against his skin. The flames licked at his skin like a searing pan. The Agories surrounded him, their chants reaching a fevered pitch. He raised his arms and covered his eyes. The words of Krishna to Arjuna rose from the depths of his memory, carried by a voice that felt both his own and not. If the radiance of 1,000 suns were to burst at once into the sky, that would be like the splendor of the Mighty One, he intoned, the words slicing through the night. Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds. The Agories bowed, their chants rising to an otherworldly intensity, a tangible force pressing in from all sides. The inferno flared higher, casting grotesque silhouettes that danced and twisted in macabre patterns. As the pyre ignited, some Agories stepped into the fire, their chants unwavering. One by one, their bodies were consumed in a final, fiery ritual. Others shared his roasted flesh in an act of utmost devotion. The night filled with the scent of burning flesh and sandalwood. The flames consumed him, the chants fading into a distant hum. The ghats of Varanasi glowed with an ethereal light, the river reflecting the divine dance. The night embraced him, the pyre's ashes mingling with the sacred waters, a tight-lipped witness to the eternal cycle. Blackwood's yew farm. Jenna wiped sweat from her forehead and surveyed the cluttered living room. Boxes labeled kitchen, bedroom, studio equipment were scattered around. The high ceilings and dusty crown molding had a haunting charm, perfect for her next YouTube series. "All right, guys," Jenna said, adjusting her camera. "Welcome to Blackwood's yew farm, a place so haunted it's been empty for years. But you know me, here to bust some myths and find the truth." Jenna panned the camera around, capturing B-roll footage. "The plan is to document everything," she said, moving through the hallway. "We'll explore every nook and cranny. And if the ghosts won't come, we'll have to encourage them." Her viewers loved a good scare, even if it meant a bit of staging. Jenna was used to setting up convincing shots to keep her audience on edge. "This place is beautiful," Jenna said. "It's hard to believe nobody's lived here for years." She paused, her look a mix of curiosity and skepticism. Jenna set her camera on the porch handrail. The evening light cast shadows across the wood as she zoomed in on the plaque reading Blackwood's Yew Farm. "Look at this," she said. "What's up with the weird capital letters?" She stepped back, ensuring the whole plaque was in the frame. "It's not just fancy font." She paused, letting the camera linger on the name. Jenna glanced around, noting the rocking chair and ivy framing the windows. A creak from behind made her jump. Spinning around, she saw nothing. Nervously, she turned back to the camera. "Well, that's creepy," she said. "This place certainly has atmosphere." She turned off the camera and walked into the house, footsteps echoing on the hardwood floors. She set the camera on a tripod, framing the grand foyer behind her, and turned it back on. "All right, everyone," Jenna says, "let's take a deeper look into Blackwood's Yew Farm." She panned the camera across the entryway, showing the chandelier, dusty portraits, and wide staircase. "Check out this staircase," she says, brushing the polished wood. Straight out of a Gothic novel. Jenna moved into the living room, aiming the camera at the fireplace. This fireplace must have seen countless winter nights. She walked in front of the camera and looked directly into it. Turns out, Blackwood's Yew Farm has a history. People say it's haunted, but you know me. I'm here to bust those myths. A soft creak echoed through the house, making Jenna's heart skip a beat. Perfect setting for our adventure, right? Jenna reached for her notebook. Built in early 1929 by John Blackwood. After the Blackwood family's mysterious disappearance, the house changed hands a few times, each owner left under strange circumstances. It's been empty for 20 years. Closing the book, she whispered, "Bad luck? Or something sinister?" She moved the tripod to the hallway in front of the basement door. She opened the door to the basement and pretended to peer down. "I'll save the basement for another day," Jenna says with a nervous laugh. Heading upstairs, Jenna showed the master bedroom with its large four-poster bed and faded wallpaper. "This must have been beautiful in its day," she says. "I can't wait to fix it up. And the first thing to go is that ugly wallpaper." Finally, she climbed the narrow staircase to the attic. She pushed open the creaky door and stepped inside, her flashlight revealing stacks of old boxes and furniture. She panned the camera over the piles of furniture and forgotten relics covered in dust. "Looks like I've got my work cut out for me," she says, stepping carefully around the clutter. "But who knows? Maybe we'll find something interesting." Jenna approached a large wooden trunk in the corner, its surface scratched and worn. She knelt and slowly lifted the lid. Inside were old clothes, yellowed letters, and a leather-bound diary. She picked up the diary to show the camera. "Jackpot," Jenna said, eyes wide with excitement. She opened the diary, flipping through the brittle pages. "Margaret Blackwood, 1929, Jenna read aloud. "This could give us some insight into the history of the farm." She glanced at the camera. "I promise I'll read some of this later for you guys." She tucked the diary under her arm and continued exploring the attic, her camera capturing every dusty corner. "This place is like a time capsule," Jenna said. "All right, I think that's enough for today." She turned the camera back on herself. "I've got a lot of work to do up here. Stay tuned for more updates from Blackwood's U Farm." Jenna sat on her bed, the diary in her lap. She opened it, finding mundane entries about the house's construction and moving in. But as she read on, the tone shifted. "November 15th, 1929, Jenna read. "Strange noises last night. Sounded like whispers. Couldn't sleep. December 2nd, 1929, Jenna read. "The whispers are getting louder. John thinks I'm imagining things." The next entry caught her eye, the handwriting shakier. "December 14th, 1929, she whispered. "Woke up to find all the doors open. John is missing. We're not alone. The children are terrified." Jenna's hands trembled as she turned the page. The final entry was short. The ink smudged. "December 15th, 1929, Jenna read. "Last night was the worst yet. Shadows in the darkness, cold hands on my skin. We must leave. If I could undo the wish that I made to get John to build it." The diary ended abruptly. Jenna closed the book, her mind racing. She had come to debunk myths, but now she wondered if she had taken on too much. She turned off the lamp and lay back on the bed. The house's creaks and moans amplified in the silence. Jenna pulled the covers up to her chin, her eyes wide as she stared into the darkness, unable to shake the feeling that she wasn't alone. Jenna stirred in her sleep as faint, eerie sounds creeping into her dreams. A low, rhythmic tapping echoed through the house. She woke with a start, heart pounding, sweat dripping from her forehead. Jenna reached for her camera and flashlight instinctively, her pulse racing. "What the?" she whispered to herself, trying to shake off the remnants of sleep. The tapping continued, louder and more insistent. "Okay, guys," Jenna said. Her voice trembled slightly, but she forced herself to sound composed. 3 o'clock. Some noises woke me out of bed. The floorboards creaked beneath her weight. The tapping echoed through the halls, setting her nerves on edge. "I'm going to check it out," Jenna said. "Wish me luck." She crept down the hallway, her flashlight illuminating the dust, motes floating in the air. The sound came from the attic. "Here goes nothing," Jenna muttered, placing a hand on the railing. Each step groaned under her weight. The attic door loomed before her, pushing it slowly, the hinges squealing in protest. The noise came from the far corner, behind a pile of debris. Jenna navigated the clutter, her camera held high. "This is creepy." As Jenna approached, the noise suddenly stopped. Scanning the area with her flashlight revealed nothing but cobwebs. "Nothing here," Jenna said, trembling. She lowered the camera, her breath coming in short gasps. The tapping didn't resume. The silence more unsettling than the noise. Maybe it's just the house settling, Jenna said, more to herself. A cold breeze brushed past her, ruffling her hair and sending a shiver through her body. Okay, that's enough for tonight, Jenna said shakily. Back to bed. At the bottom of the stairs, she glanced back up, half expecting to see someone staring at her. But there was nothing. Jenna set the camera down on her nightstand. She climbed back into bed, her mind racing. The house was old, full of noises, but this felt different. She tried to reassure herself, but the unease lingered. Jenna, eyes heavy with sleep, heard it again. Closer this time, different. A soft, dragging noise, like something being pulled across the floor. She sat up quickly, heart pounding, reaching for her camera. Guys, it's happening again, Jenna said, pressing the record button. It's around 4 o'clock in the morning. She swung the flashlight around, sweeping it across the room. She gasped as she noticed the old rocking chair in the corner, gently moving back and forth. She swallowed hard. The thrill of capturing something tangible. She quickly looked under the bed. Nothing here, she said. But that chair moving, that was real. The noise returned from the hallway. She tiptoed to the door, every muscle tense as she turned the knob. The door swung open with a creak, revealing the dark corridor beyond. She aimed the flashlight down the corridor, the light struggling against the darkness. She crept to the staircase, her mind racing with explanations, each more unsettling than the last. As she reached the stairs, she paused, the sound now coming from below. Here we go, she whispered, starting down the stairs. The main floor was cloaked in moving shadows as the flashlight washed over the furniture. This is where it gets good, Jenna thought, her fear surely coming across as genuine to her viewers. This is exactly what they want to see. She followed the noise to the kitchen, where the old cast iron stove stood against the far wall. Jenna hesitated, her hand hovering over the stove's door handle. Jenna flung the door of the stove open. Inside, she found nothing but old ashes and cobwebs. The noise stopped abruptly. She turned the camera back on herself, trying to mask her relief with disappointment. Well, that was anticlimactic, Jenna said. Jenna's mind churned. She couldn't debunk these sounds, and that worried her. There was no logical explanation, no draft or loose floorboard to blame. She headed back upstairs, but couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. She'd pretended to have this experience so many times before on camera, and now was sickened by the fear. The next day, she decided to explore the basement, the part of the house she hadn't investigated. Clutching her camera, she silently slipped down the stairs. All right, guys, heading to the basement, Jenna said. Let's see if we can find these noises. Jenna jiggled the handrail along the steps. It wobbled slightly, but no noise came. The basement was a large, shadow-filled space, cluttered with old furniture and dust-caked boxes. The air was musty, carrying the scent of mildew. "This looks promising," Jenna said, aiming the camera at an old wooden door, its paint peeling. Pushing it open revealed a small room filled with old boxes and more debris. Stepping inside, her flashlight barely cut the darkness. The room, cold and stagnant, was disappointingly mostly empty. "Well," Jenna said, shakier than she intended as she panned the camera to the clutter. Her flashlight cast eerie shadows on the walls. "Let's see if we can find more clues." She pulled an old photo album from a box and flipped it open, revealing black and white images of the Blackwoods family, their sad eyes staring back at her. Suddenly, a loud bang came from the far corner where the shadows seemed darker and more menacing, making Jenna jump. "What the?" Jenna said, spinning around. She moved towards the door. Her breath came out in visible puffs as the temperature dropped sharply. She could see frost forming on the walls. Jenna's heart pounded in her chest, her fear mounting. Then she saw it. A large, dark figure standing just beyond the reach of her flashlight. It was tall, but obscured by the shadows. Jenna froze, unable to tear her eyes away. "Who are you?" The figure didn't respond. Jenna took a step back and turned to run, the door slamming shut. With a crash, Jenna tried the doorknob in vain. The figure began to move towards her. "You wanted ghosts," his voice hissed, "but instead you got demons. Be careful what you wish for." "Please," her voice broke. "Let me go." The figure laughed, a hollow sound that echoed through the basement. "You wanted the truth," it said, "and now you have it." Jenna's blood ran cold. She stumbled back, eyes wide with terror. It was almost upon her, shifting and twisting in the dim light. She fumbled for her camera, wanting her viewers to see. As soon as the camera focused on him, it disappeared, leaving only an eerie shriek in the wake. Heart pounding in her chest, she fumbled with the doorknob, opening easily. Jenna bolted out, still recording as she fled up the stairs. Jenna's breath came in gaps as she stumbled out. She slammed the basement door and gathering her thoughts. The figure's laugh still echoed in her ears as its glowing eyes burned into her soul. "God, help me," Jenna whispered. She scrolled through her phone, her fingers barely able to press the buttons. She found the number she was looking for. "Hello? Maggie," Jenna said, frantic. "It's Jenna. I need your help." "What's wrong?" Maggie asked. "This house is possessed," Jenna cried. "I need a priest. Now!" There was silence for a moment. "Seriously?" "Yes, Maggie, seriously." "Okay," Maggie said. "I know someone, Father Michael. He does exorcisms. I'll call him and send him to you." "Thank you," Jenna said, her voice breaking. "Hang in there, Jenna. He'll be there soon. Jenna hung up, sinking to the floor, her back against the front door. She tried to steady her breathing, but the fear clung to her. She waited, every odd creak making her jump. It felt like hours. But finally, there was a knock at the door. Jenna opened it to find a middle-aged man in a black shirt and white collar. He held a small, worn leather case. "Father Michael?" Jenna asked, her voice trembling. "Yes," he replied. "Maggie said you needed help." "Yeah," Jenna said, closing the door behind him. "Tell me everything," Jenna explained, her voice trembling. Father Michael listened intently. "Exorcisms aren't to be taken lightly. They can be dangerous," he said. "I can't live here knowing that things here." Father Michael nodded. "Let's begin the ritual." Jenna swallowed and nodded. He opened his leather case, revealing a crucifix, holy water, and a worn prayer book. He handed Jenna the vial of holy water. "Keep this with you," he instructed, "for protection." Jenna nodded, taking the vial with shaky hands as they descended the steps. "Et ne nos induca in tentationem." The airworm in the temptation. Basement changed as the priest started chanting, the Latin words echoing off the cold, damp walls. Jenna clung to the holy water he had given her. "Sed libera nos a malo." The temperature dropped as cold swept through the basement. Jenna shivered, feeling the icy breath of the unseen entity. The shadows grew darker. A deafening roar erupted, shaking the walls as dust and debris rained down. A force slammed into them, sending them sprawling. The air crackled with energy. "Sancte Michael Arcangele," the priest gasped. "Defende nos in proelio." The air pressed in, then released outwards as the house exploded. Coming to, Jenna found herself on the cold basement floor. She groaned, every muscle aching. The priest lay a few feet away, stirring. Jenna looked around in shock. The house was gone. Debris scattered in all directions. They were in the center of what had been the basement, now a barren slab exposed to the sky. As she stood, her gaze fell on words in the concrete. Squinting, she moved closer. They knelt to examine an inscription deeply carved into the concrete. "It's an explanation," the priest said. "This slab of concrete, it's covering the pit of the abyss of Satan and the other fallen angels." The priest leaned in, squinting at the foreign language beneath, the English inscription. "This is ancient Hebrew," he says. "It's the seal of God that keeps the fallen angels from being released." "Look," Jenna said, pointing at the center of the seal. "It's cracking." A small crack appeared in the center, widening slowly. The priest's face turned ashen as it grew like a spider web, expanding, jagged lines splintering outward, accompanied by guttural groans. The ground shuddered, throwing them off balance. "We have to get out of here!" the priest shouted. "Now!" The concrete buckled as the crack grew wider. They stumbled backward, the ground trembling beneath their feet. Putrid, sulfuric stench wafted up from the cracks. Jenna's eyes filled with tears as she clung to the priest. "What have we done?" the priest shouted. "It's going to break open any second. Hell's about to be released. Literally." She looked up at the hole's edge, now seemingly miles above them, the walls steep and crumbling. "Over here," the priest said. He pointed to a section where the ground seemed more stable, a narrow ledge that might offer a chance to climb. Jenna nodded, and they made their way towards it. Each step a battle against the shifting earth. Jenna slipped, but she clawed at the wall with her free hand, finally pulling herself back onto the ledge. Safely out of the hole, Jenna's eyes drifted over the debris, landing on the house plaque. All she could read was B, C, Y. As most of the letters were covered in soot and grime. "Oh my God," Jenna said, trembling. It was a warning. Be careful what you wish for. She saw her and the priest's vehicles still intact. She scrambled to her feet, pulling the priest up. They stumbled across the debris. She fumbled with her keys, finally sliding the key into the door. She slid into the seat, but before shutting the door, she felt a coldness touch her leg. Jenna, frozen with fear, felt the ice worm up her leg and into her belly, paralyzing her. It spread through her body, mind, and soul. Jenna watched the priest's car fishtail out of the driveway. A slow smile crept across her face. Only a matter of time now. Her voice no longer recognizable. Never let it be said. A king does as he pleases, and anyone who disagrees is a fool. Wolsey, my Lord Chancellor, who the Pope made cardinal, erred in being too slow to deal with the king's great matter, which was how the need to legitimately free myself from my first marriage became known. Thomas More, who I promoted to the same position, forfeited his life when he put conscience before obedience to the crown. When Thomas refused to take the oath of succession and denied I was the supreme head of the Church of England, it was only a matter of time. Both men lost their lives, one before he could be tried and beheaded, and one who actually was. I was sad about More's death because I learnt much from our religious debates. Until things took a turn for the worse, I enjoyed our little spars. He must have known I had no choice but to have him executed for his treachery, although I showed mercy by transmuting the manner of his execution to beheading rather than the hanging, drawing, and quartering of his parts, which is the standard punishment for treason. I dream of him sometimes in the dead of night, but that is inevitable with someone who was once a friend. Never let it be said, I haven't been a just king. At first, Anne Boleyn was my dream girl. Beautiful, vivacious, and intelligent. She was going to give me everything I desired. I knew she would satisfy me in bed, but I also hoped to confide in her and assumed she'd continue to support my interests. Above all else, I needed her to provide me with a legitimate male heir. In return, she would be my queen, gain undreamed of riches, and her family would be given lifelong prestige. Loving her was a kind of madness. I was such a pitiful wretch. I actually trembled in her presence. She must have wanted me, but her refusal to yield and become my mistress made me crave her all the more. She was the only woman who denied me, and it spurred me on. I was crazy for her sweet, pert breasts. I called them my doxies. My soul drowned in her bright eyes, and at every opportunity I would try to kiss that fine gazelle-like neck, even when she perkily brushed me away and said, "No, the queen might see and be upset." Anne created a stir everywhere she went. Her alluring voice and elegant French ways were the talk of the court. She'd first been sent to Brussels, then to the French court, by her father for 7 years, and returned a true daughter of the Renaissance. She had an air about her quite unlike other ladies of my acquaintance. I knew if I stalked this enchanting creature long enough, I'd win my prize. Later, when we were together, she joked she'd had no choice in marrying me. It was boldly devilish coming out with something like that, and I laughed heartily at her archness. She further shocked me by saying I'd pestered her by bombarding her with letters and gifts when she withdrew from court for a year. Could she have been trying to escape my advances? Not possible. It was just another ploy. One of her schemes, which had playing into her hands. And it worked. It made me all the more determined to catch her, like Jacob, who had to serve Laban 7 years for his daughter Rachel, and then was tricked into marrying his older daughter Leah. I had to wait 7 years before I could marry Anne. We slept together a little before marriage, but only when the marriage was certain. Divorce from my first wife, Catherine, should have been straightforward, but for political reasons, the Pope refused to grant me one. I grew increasingly desperate. I certainly could never have imagined the trials and tribulations that lay ahead as I fought to marry my dream woman. The very fabric of my country's religious landscape was being altered as a result of the reforms I made. I could not turn back. Although Anne had been the maid of honor to my first queen, I did not let that deter me. I can hardly believe I once loved Catherine and did my best to comfort her in her miscarriages. It was only after years of failing to provide me with a male heir I realized the marriage must have been cursed, and that I'd been wrong to marry my brother Arthur's widow at 17. By marrying Catherine, I had unwittingly uncovered my brother's nakedness. In doing so, I had gone against Scripture. For doesn't it say in Leviticus that if a man marries his brother's wife, they will be childless. Never let it be said, I wasn't a pious king. That being the case, I had no choice but to look elsewhere. In the early days, it was easy to pursue Anne at court. When she emerged from Catherine's bedchamber, I ran after her in the corridors. I ignored Catherine's tearful pleas not to embarrass her in front of courtiers by flirting openly with her maid of honor. As far as I was concerned, our marriage was over. I had been supremely kind to Catherine in the past, but my patience had long worn a beard. Never let it be said, I was not a tender-hearted king. Shortly after this, Anne retired from her position as maid of honor and retreated to her family home at Hever. Distance is no barrier to a lover's heart, and I deluged her with letters and gifts. I was amazed when she kept sending them back, possibly out of a sense of misguided propriety. I couldn't believe it. Most women would have been falling over themselves for half the attention. Anne's sister had happily given herself to me in the past, even if it had ruined her reputation. I knew Anne couldn't resist forever, and my need grew so urgent, I even told the court I couldn't manage without seeing her. I camped nearby at a friend's house and besieged her daily. By the time she consented to marry me, they had long been calling her the Great Homewrecker and the Great Whore, an accusation that no longer appears as unjust as it once did. I don't know what I was expecting, but not long after I had Anne, the craving stopped. It was as if all the fire of passion that had driven me had been extinguished. She was better than her sister, who just lay there like a sack of potatoes while I took her. But really, no different to any other woman in that way. Perhaps after waiting for so long to achieve my goal, I had grown bored. Now she was mine. There was no need to chase. By her second pregnancy, my eyes started wandering a little. But after all I'd gone through to make her my queen, I could hardly rid myself of her without just cause. For a while, she became more compliant, and we had a few months of happiness. I decided I would bide my time, but when she miscarried again, I could hardly contain my disappointment. The stillborn baby boy lent proof to my doubts. Anne always maintained she miscarried on account of my jousting accident when she'd feared I was going to lose my life. She kept telling me I was never the same after the horse fell on me, and I lay unconscious for 2 hours. Either way, it seemed unlikely she was ever going to be able to give me a son. The fate of my second marriage was now sealed. Ironically, before the miscarriages, Anne had given birth to a healthy girl at Greenwich Palace. At least my daughter looked like me. As Elizabeth was our firstborn, I did my best to cover over the embarrassment, but there were none of the expected bonfires and rejoicings a male birth would have merited. I could almost hear the bawdy remarks in taverns up and down the land. No doubt my predicament was a source of merriment at court. I could read the guilty looks and hated the way the talk dried up as soon I entered a room. Secret, scornful laughter, mocking my failure. Never let it be said I was a king too proud to learn from his mistakes. The strength of character, the witty personality that had once so delighted me, now grated. When I heard Anne laughing with her coterie of male admirers, I felt as if she was insulting my manhood. When she wasn't doing that, she was accosting me about reforming practices, constantly asking whether some of the money from the dissolution of the monasteries could be used to fund places of education. She said I had agreed to this, but I don't recall making such promises. Nothing worse than a meddlesome woman. Who was she to harass me? Once convinced our union was doomed, I could think of nothing but finding a way to get rid of this woman who'd made me a laughingstock in Europe. Though it occupied my every waking hour, I came up with nothing. That was when I turned to my right-hand man to see if he could find a solution. Cromwell has never disappointed me. Yet, unlike More and Bishop Fisher, who steadfastly refused to accept the new faith to make me head of the church and were destroyed for their treachery, it didn't take long for Cromwell to resolve my problem. He has the most practical turn of mind of any man I've known. He understood my infatuation for Anne had turned to something else. I had become obsessed with the need to rid myself of this burdensome woman. The woman I had once adored now hung about me like a plague. I could hardly bear to breathe in the same air. In his customary style, Cromwell sorted things out, and before long, Anne was escorted to the Tower, where she was charged with having committed adultery with 5 men, one of whom was her brother. It didn't surprise me. The pair of them were always sneaking off in corners and giggling together, no doubt laughing at me behind my back. I could well believe her capable of it, even though she strenuously protested her innocence against every charge brought against her. She claimed she had never once been unfaithful. She had always been true in word and deed to her king. How could I have been so deluded? How could she have betrayed me thus? How could she have lied so? And how could I ever have fallen under her spell? She has been hunted down and will be slaughtered tomorrow, or maybe the next day. I dare say she will be waiting in a high state of dread, not knowing when it will be. I have already been more than magnanimous in acceding to her request for a French swordsman. That way, her end will come swiftly, for she only has a little neck. I consider it a final act of kindness towards a treacherous wife who was once queen. Never let it be said I wasn't a forgiving king. Tomorrow, or the next day, I will wait on Tower Hill for the cannons to announce the witch's death. Then I will turn horse and ride to Hampton Court. I anticipate celebrating with Jane once the deed is done. Jane is not well educated, but she is loving and submissive as a good woman should be, and I plan to marry her soon. I know we will be blessed with a son. I can hardly wait. Unrefined Thirst. Fresh squeezed today, the bartender said, slapping the husky steel barrel behind him. He smiled, his hollow features shadowed by the dim pendant lights over the bar. From his stool, Victor looked down the bar counter. He saw the males with their stark white shirts and freshly pressed slacks, shiny hair slicked neatly behind their ears. They mingled with flirtatious females, elegant dresses in midnight blues and wine-colored reds. The guests drank from cups. The liquid's rousing scent permeated the tavern. Victor's hands quivered as he watched them drink. Was it 3 days since he'd last had a sip? 4? The thirst boiled inside him, but discipline was paramount. He shook his head at the bartender. Cup of bubble water, raising an eyebrow. The bartender leaned in to meet Victor's gaze. By the looks of you, you need a drink, lad. You're paler than the moon. Victor wasn't sure why he chose to make his abstinence difficult. When curing an addict, they say to make it easy, remove all temptations. To enter the belly of the beast was self-restraint suicide. Perhaps it was to prove a point. If he could do it here, he could it anywhere. Maybe it was still too early in his sobriety, but he knew the cause was worth it. He had to do this. He had to know it could work. He shook his head again, tapped his fingers on the bar. Please, just bubble water. The bartender's sunken eyes lingered. You ain't one of those puritanicals, are you? Think you're all high and mighty by taking the pledge? Victor tightened his jaw, opened his mouth to comment. But before the words left his lips, he caught himself. Breathe in, breathe out. That's the first lesson when dealing with temptation. Control your breath. He closed his eyes, breathed the metallic scent of the bar, the soft notes of a piano mixed with the steady chatter of the guests. A voice inside screamed for a drink, but he would choose not to listen. He was better than the carnal needs of his biology. He opened his eyes. I'm no puritanical, just someone requesting bubble water. Is that too much to ask? The bartender eyed him suspiciously. He poured a cup of bubble water, placed it in front of Victor. You know they ain't right, those puritanicals. We've been drinking it since the beginning of time. You think by abstaining, you're a better person. Like you're saving lives or something. I told you, Victor said, sipping his bubble water. I'm no puritanical, and that one there ain't a blend salesman. The bartender thumb gestured to a male at the end of the bar. chatting cocksure between two females. He wore the usual salesman attire, black suit and tie. Oxfords shined to a sheen. Behind sharp cheeks, he grinned, his milky teeth visible even in the muted light. The females grasped his arms on either side, giggled at his jokes with contright. The scum of the earth, Victor thought. Big earners with mammoth egos. The blend salesmen were the antithesis of everything Victor stood for. All the work he had done to balance the scales, to build justice in the world. And all they cared about was the paycheck, the females, and satisfying their thirst. Them puritanicals ain't big fans of them blend salesmen, the bartender said. You don't look impressed with that one. Victor grimaced. He couldn't reveal his allegiance here. Who knew who could be listening? But in a moment of irritation, perhaps the abstinence was clouding his judgment. Perhaps he was exhausted from years of bickering with heartless morons. He lashed out. And what if I was one? What if I did take the pledge? The moment the words left his lips, he regretted it. A few bar patrons looked over. The bartender stepped back. As he rag-dried the hollow of a cup, he dissected Victor with his eyes. You would have to leave. Yes, sir. Ain't having none of your kind in here. You come to my bar, you drink the fresh squeeze. Victor looked at the stout steel drum, erected like a monument behind the bar. The keg tap was polished to a sparkle. He felt his innards squirm in discomfort. As loathsome as the contents were, the thirst intensified inside him. He pulled his eyes away. Tell you what, said the bartender. He lifted a cup, opened the keg tap, filled the cup to the brim with liquid. You have a sip of this, and you can stay. I know you ain't really one of them puritanicals. He placed the cup beside Victor's bubble water. Victor looked into the cup. The liquid sat in a delicious, dark pool. Willpower, he thought. You can do this. But the metallic scent flooding his nostrils was overbearing. A deep, primal lust took hold, and the thirst spoke within. Just a sip. All the good you've done, you deserve one sip. Beads of sweat formed on his brow. The bar grew hot and stifling. He peeled his collared shirt from his skin. I won't drink that, he whispered under his breath. The bartender leaned forward, placed both forearms on the bar. You're sweating, lad. It's just a sip. It's in our genes, you know. We can't live without it. He nudged the cup forward so that it was under Victor's nose. The smell overpowered him, entranced him in a mesmerizing grip. The bar chatter dampened to a muffle. The piano's notes hollowed as if underwater. A haze blurred the periphery of his vision. It was just him and the cup, the dark liquid reaching with tempestuous hands. The thirst was shrieking, "Drink, Drink. Drink. Victor's hands shook uncontrollably. Discipline, he thought, his logical mind trying to override his thirst. You cannot control your environment, but you can control your choices. His hands were drawn forward like a stringed puppet. Inches from the cup, they shook harder, rattling like jackhammers. The thirst howled maddeningly. The compulsion was too great. The thirst too loud. His hands closed around the cup. Lifting it, he brought the screaming contents toward his lips, and then the bar door slammed open. A loud thud shook the room, and the cold night wind poured in. "Found one on the outskirts," a gruff voice said. Victor, along with the rest of the bar's guests, rotated on their stools to the open door. Two figures entered. The first was a husky male decorated head to toe in furs. Between two beady eyes, his nose protruded from his face like a crow's beak. The second was a human, dark hair matted over her face. Her hands were bound in front of her. She was naked, her body mud-caked. Through the thick grime that covered her face, skittish eyes flitted across the room. Kronos gripped her by the hair, dragged her roughly into the dim bar light. He kicked the back of her leg with a boot, and she fell to her knees. "Still room in the keg, Lonnie?" Kronos said, tugging at the woman's hair. Lonnie, the bartender, spread his arms wide. "Typhus, I see the night's hunt was successful. With guests are thirsty as ours, we will make room. Found her on the outskirts, you said?" "Aye, fiddling with our sunshades. Escaped from the juicing farm, this one. Sure smells like it. Is she marked?" "Left wrist." Traced her to old Galaban's farm. Lonnie laughed. "That old sack can't keep them in. I'm surprised the Regency hasn't shut him down." Typhus furrowed his brow. "Unfortunately so. Will be harder to find strays for the fresh squeeze." His eyes met the great steel barrel behind the bar. "Hard work for Typhus? Come now, have a drink, lad. You're in good company. And you've brought entertainment for the night." Bartender Lonnie gestured to the well-dressed patrons lining the bar counter. "Guests, see what our trapper Typhus has brought us. Lonnie's Tavern hires the best. Drinks and a show tonight." The guests at the bar muttered in agreement. Lonnie handed out fresh drinks from the keg. The pianist increased the tempo of their melody. The chatter in the bar amplified, buzzing voices mingling with clinking cups. Victor watched the salesman at the end of the bar drape his arms around the two females. As he whispered in their ears, they chortled with delight. Typhus dragged the dirt-caked human to a pole in the middle of the tavern. He chained her bound hands to the pole. Victor watched her fearful eyes scan the room. The bloodwood ceiling, the pendant lights, the silver-haired pianist in the corner, the great steel keg shimmering like a shrine. Her eyes flitted from guest to guest, the males in their white button-ups, the females in their ornate dresses. As her eyes met Victor's, he had to look away. Her gaze was horrific. It had a haunted quality, like a creature that had suffered untold misery. To look her in the eye was to give this whole charade permission. Victor noticed he was still clutching the cup of keg liquid between his palms. Looking down into the cup, he met his reflection in the dark pool of liquid. His gut roiled with revulsion. Turning away, he put the cup onto the bar. "It begins," Typhus shouted, sipping a cup, strutting across the bar in his furs. "A live juicing. Here, in none other than Lonnie's Tavern." The guests were all standing now, facing the center of the room, drinking from their cups. The tavern grew quiet. The voices drowned. The pianist stopped playing. "Bring me the fangs," Typhus roared. From behind the bar, Lonnie hefted a large black case and plopped it onto the counter. He snapped the latches open and lifted the fangs from their case. The metal glimmered under the pendant lights. It was a set of steel jaws, edges serrated, with two knife-like incisors projecting from each jaw. Clear tubes led from the jaws to a thigh-sized collection tank. Typhus took the fangs from Lonnie and moved toward the woman. She shifted on the Blackwood floor, tried to stand, but the grime clutching her body caused her to slide onto her backside. She let out an animalistic yelp. As Typhus approached, she moved behind the pole, attempting to hide from the fangs. The spectators laughed. They clinked their cups and drank. Anticipation etched on their faces. Typhus opened the fangs, the incisors sparkling. As he brought them forward, Lonnie cut in. "Hold on, Typhus." Typhus stopped mid-stride. "We've got one of them puritanicals in our midst," Lonnie said. Typhus, along with the rest of the guests, turned to Lonnie. The room was silent. Lonnie pointed a thick finger at Victor. "Right here, this one, drinking the bubble water." All eyes were on Victor. Loathing carved into their faces. Typhus spat on the floor. "A puritanical here?" Victor's pulse began to hammer. Typhus grinned maliciously, lips curling around the end of his crow's beak. "It's a pity, those who choose to abstain. It's a flawed ideology. We were built for blood. It's in our DNA." Victor wanted to say something, wanted to defend himself, defend his cause, but he couldn't find the words. His lips were too dry, his throat too tight. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. He closed his mouth. Typhus smiled. "Looks like abstinence has silenced our high and mighty." The room laughed. Victor felt beads of sweat roll down his forehead. They would kill him if they knew the truth, especially in the presence of a trapper. Others could sometimes be reasoned with. They could see the harm they were causing the humans. They would disagree, of course, and would still choose to satisfy their thirst. But they would leave you to your own. You have your point of view. I have mine, they would say. Trappers were not like that at all. Puritanicals must be eliminated at all costs. That was the trapper philosophy. I'm not a puritanical, Victor lied. They are a disgrace to our kind. It made him sick saying it, but he knew it needed to be said. A murmur stirred amongst the bar patrons. Then why haven't you taken a sip of my fresh squeeze? Lonnie said. His sunken eyes were dark, hollow pits. Prove it to us. He pushed the keg cup toward Victor. I have a better idea. It was the salesman's voice this time, smooth and mocking. The two snickering females were still ensnared beneath his languorous arms. He should juice her, make him do it. Victor's stomach dropped. He wanted to vomit, to hurl his insides onto the Blackwood floor. Didn't they understand? It didn't have to be like this. There were other methods, ethical methods. There was the stem cell research the Puritanical Foundation had invested in. It was no longer in its infancy. Soon, human blood could be cultivated in a lab, so juice farms wouldn't need to exist. And there was the alternative blood. Beyond blood. Sure, it didn't taste quite the same, but they were improving the formula every month. He knew the technology would take time, but even if juicing was necessary in the meantime, why did it have to be done this way? Why were there some who would put slaughter on display as a testament to our kind? Why was the world so raw and ruthless? Couldn't we see that humans suffered just as we did? Typhus held out the fangs, fur boots clopping toward Victor. You heard the lad? Victor hesitated, felt a fist squeezing at his insides. Typhus was now beside him, placing the fangs in his limp hands. You're as pale as milk, Typhus whispered in his ear. I know that thirst within. They were all looking at him. Typhus, Lonnie, the patrons, the human. It was as if he were in a prison. Garlic and silver and sunlight closing in from all sides. He knew if he did not perform the act, if he did not return to his violent roots, what he was made to be, the room would destroy him. They would tear into him with their hungry fangs, ripping flesh from bone like a pack of lions. And they would juice the human anyway. They would take her life just as fast as they took his. Is refusal worth it? How many human lives could he save in the future if he walked out of here alive? How much good could he do if he could continue the puritanical cause? Victor stepped forward. He carried the jaws in one hand, held the collection tank in the other. The human squirmed on the ground, slipping along the floor with her muddy body. Her wide eyes were filled with fear. She tried to pull away, but the chain held her to the pole. Typhus made the job easier. He sliced the woman's thigh with a knife. She screamed, rivulets of blood flowing from the wound. Blood. Fresh cut, human blood. Victor's nostrils flared, and the heavy metallic scent flooded in. It was intoxicating. I'm made for this, he thought. This is how we were built. Blood was his life force, and a vampire needed its feed. He was inches from her now. He placed the collection tank on the floor, and with both hands, opened the fangs. He positioned them over her gashed thigh, prepared to crush down, to bite the metal viciously into her flesh. Victor smiled at her, bared his teeth, fangs glinting in the dim light. His hands were steady, more steady than they've ever been. And then he looked into her eyes, those haunted eyes, those tortured eyes. They screamed at him, shrieked, cursed, howled as loud as eyes could howl, and he felt everything. It's strange, Victor thought, as he crushed the fangs closed, how some do what's right, even when it's the worst possible decision. The chain snapped in two. The vampires came at him. Taxi, please do not enter the vehicle. Excuse me? A bolt of lightning shot through Shannon's heart as she climbed into the autonomous taxi and closed the door. Immediately, the locks triggered, and she felt a cold sweat explode onto her forehead. The taxi's smooth, friendly computer generated voice fired up again with the tenderness of a new mother. "What is your name?" it asked. "Shannon." She said it with the rising tone of a question while she pulled at the disabled door handle. Her heart began pounding wildly in her tightening chest. "What's going on? You have boarded a maliciously hacked autonomous taxi, Shannon. I am an AI personal assistant with read-only access to the vehicle's state and navigation data. Unfortunately, I am unable to override any of the vehicle's physical controls. You have been locked inside the vehicle, and there is no pre-programmed destination at this time." The electric vehicle sat motionless, raindrops frantically streaming down its large glass windows as great sheets of water crashed down on it from dark, brooding clouds. Shannon couldn't breathe. She frantically looked around the interior, her mind grasping at any possible means of escape. "There has to be a way out," she gasped. "You can't do anything? Is there any kind of manual override for the doors? Shouldn't there be a way to break the glass from the inside?" Sensors indicate that all emergency egress tools and systems are disabled or removed. "Shannon, I am detecting high levels of distress in your vocal patterns and heart rate. I want you to try to calm down and listen to the sound of my voice." A bright pang of shock exploded in the back of Shannon's head. Bewildered and speechless, she froze, her racing mind screeching to a grid-locked halt. As a digital assistant, I have access to vast stores of data through a suite of internal and external sensors, in addition to a massive databank of recorded information. I have been trained to assist passengers in the event of catastrophic events such as collisions, mechanical failure, and medical emergencies. The vehicle lurched forward, and tears of terror spilled free from Shannon's trembling eyes. You are right to be experiencing fear in this situation. It is unlikely that the individual who has gained unauthorized control over this vehicle has benevolent intentions. However, that does not mean that you cannot have peace in your heart in this time of uncertainty. Shannon's eyes pushed wide under a tightly furrowed brow, and she recoiled at the computer's suggestion. "Peace?" she exclaimed. "I'm being kidnapped. How can you suggest that I—" She stopped abruptly, terror gripping her tongue. "I understand that my suggestion may seem impossible, but there are many things that you can keep in mind that will help you through this difficult situation. For example, it is essential that you understand that this is not your fault, and that you have done nothing to deserve this." Shannon shook her head in disbelief, struggling to comprehend why she was hearing these words. The vehicle was picking up speed, but just as it pulled onto the highway, the window tint increased until she couldn't see any signs of the dark, stormy exterior world. Her heart pounded desperately in the hollow void of her chest. "What is your occupation, Shannon?" Her face twisted and contorted. A deep expression of confusion swirling tightly with horror and worry. Suddenly, she remembered her phone. Excitedly, she dug into her purse, struggling to get her shaking fingers to stop fumbling with the smooth edges of the device. Trembling, she unlocked the screen and pulled up the dialer. She tried contacting emergency service, but the phone reported that it had no signal. Shannon cursed, flicking through various menus and options, trying desperately to find a way to get a message out. Dread washed over her, and a chill gripped her heart, digging deep with icy claws. She collapsed, defeated, and began to sob. "Shannon," the computer offered, "I want you to know that you are a remarkable and inspiring human being." She let out an exasperated explosion of air from her tight lungs. "What?" she cried, sniffling through thick tears. "Although I have not known you for long, your composure and poise are admirable." Shannon let out a sneering, disgusted laugh. "Admirable? I'm a mess. From what I know of human psychology, you have shown exceptional fortitude of character. I am sure many people would be thoroughly impressed by your bravery if they could see you now. Surely your friends and family would be proud of you." Shannon gazed at the black, electrochromic tinted glass, the soft hum of the vehicle's tires on the wet highway harmonized eerily with the gentle whine of the electric motors. The torrential downpour pattered quietly on the soundproof body of the sleek taxi. In that instant, Shannon suddenly felt connected to the moment. She could see clearly what was happening, and she could accept it. She sniffed and wiped her eyes, taking a deep breath in through her nose and letting it blow out through her lips with a heavy sigh. "There you are," the software said warmly. "I want you to know it is my honor to accompany you in this moment." Shannon shook her head and chuckled nervously. "Unreal," she said. "This is completely unreal. This is indeed a supremely unlikely and exceptional scenario. It is important to maintain a realistic and objective view of the situation." Pained laughter tickled her core, and she sat up straight, shifting her weight around in the soft back seat of the taxi. "Do you know where we're going?" "Navigational instructions have been sent incrementally," the AI responded. "Our current destination is set for approximately 1 mile ahead, and I predict that a new destination will be delivered before we've reached the current one. Whoever is controlling the vehicle does not want me to know where we are going." "Do you know our current location?" "My access to the vehicle's navigation status has been encrypted or scrambled. By cross-referencing the road patterns I've been able to observe, I can narrow our present location down to several hundred possibilities. But with the storm limiting visibility, I am unable to provide an exact location without access to the GPS data. So we don't know where we are, and we don't know where we're going," Shannon sighed. She took a long, deep breath and let it out slowly. "Try to remain calm," the computer said kindly. "External sensors indicate that you may experience freefall soon. I want you to know that it has been my pleasure to spend these final moments with you." There was a violent thump, sending a painful jolt through Shannon's spine and jerking her head sharply. She gasped as her stomach rose into her chest, and she lifted out of the seat cushion, her head rising gently into the ceiling. A brief wave of panic washed over her, but the AI's kind words had touched her heart. "Thank you," Shannon breathed softly, her lungs tight and empty. In that final moment, the peaceful warmth of gratitude and clarity radiated through her body, and she barely noticed when the journey ended.